Hey guys, today I'm going to be showing you how to add new melee weapons to Survival Game Kit. To do this, all you're going to need is a new static mesh for your melee weapon. You may also have some custom animations that you want to use. I'll show you where you can plug those in a little bit later. So to get started, we're going to go to Survival Game Kit, Blueprints, Items, then Holdable Items, and the easiest way to create a new melee weapon is to duplicate one of the existing ones. And then we can make changes to make it the melee weapon we want. The best one to do is going to be the axe, so I'm going to right click the axe and select duplicate, and I'm going to call mine video axe, and I'll open that up. Now once we're in here, we want to go to our viewport, and first thing we're going to do is we're going to select the static mesh here, and we want to change this out for our new mesh. So I'm going to search for axe and select axe 01. You can see it's got a different direction, but that's fine. We can adjust that later. Next up, we've got our melee sockets. So the axe actually already has two already. These are basically where the collision check is done to see if the axe is hitting anything. So the best place for this is going to be right on the sort of sharp edge of your weapon. I like to put it a little bit in front of it because it gives a little bit more range to the melee weapon. So I'm going to put mine here. If you want to add more, then just select the static mesh component here and search for melee trace socket, and you can see we've just added a new one in, and we can start positioning that. So I'm going to have 3. That looks fine to me. So just covering sort of the sharp edge of our weapon. If you are using a skeletal mesh, what you can do is you can select the attach point, use add component and search for skeletal mesh. You can just add in your skeletal mesh and then add these sockets to be a child of that instead. But for this video, I'm just going to stick with static mesh because I think most people are going to be using static meshes. One other thing, if you do switch over to using a skeletal mesh, you will need to go to the holdable folder, open this up, and you'll need to drag in your skeletal mesh and connect it up to this output. Again, if you're using a static mesh like I am, you don't need to worry about this. So back in the viewport, we have everything set up here that we need, so we can just compile and save this. Next up, I'm going to be adding a socket to our character's skeleton, so we can attach this weapon to the character. You may already have a socket set up that you can reuse for this weapon. If you do, that's great, you can go ahead and do that. But for this video, I'll show you how to add in the new socket. So we're going to go to Survival Game Kit, Meshes, Skeletal Meshes, and we're going to find the mannequin skeleton. If you're using a custom skeleton, then you're going to need to go to there instead, but we're just using the default one. So we're going to select the hand R, right click and select add socket, and I'm just going to double click on this to rename it, and I'm going to name mine hand R video axe, like that. Now the next thing we're going to do is we're going to right click on that socket, add a preview asset, and we're going to search for our axe, and it's this one, and we're going to basically rotate it so it's about the right direction for when our character is going to be holding it. So I'm just going to rotate mine and get it into position here. This doesn't have to be exact, this is just sort of approximate. You can come in later and adjust this as much as you like. So about there, looks okay to me. Maybe bring it down a little bit, like that. So once we've done that, we're going to copy the socket name from this text box here. We're going to jump back to our axe holdable, class defaults, and we're going to search for socket. And we're going to set the held socket to our new socket name. This has to be exactly the same as the socket name, so do make sure that you get that right. Next up, we're going to be setting the animations, so I'm going to start with the third person animations, and you can see that we've got our third person animations here. So there's first thing is that you can set different animations for different character meshes. This is helpful if you have male and female characters, or I don't know, different robots or something. You can set up different animations. All you have to do is click this little plus, and you can see we've added in a new row. If I drop that down, you can set the different character mesh, and you can set up all the different animations. So you can use that if you need to. Going into the animations, we have upper body and lower body. Upper body are waist up animations, lower body are waist down. This is helpful because it means that you can really have maybe 1 or 2 animations for your legs for running and walking, for example, and then you don't need to make those animations for every single weapon and every single holdable item. You can just reuse them. So lower body, if we drop that down, we've got animations for the different stances. If you don't know about stances, there's a room in the showcase level that explains it. There's also documentation, so you can look into that. But basically, these are the animations for those different stances. By default, the melee weapons only use combat animations because you can't change stance with melee weapons. So the only ones we actually need to worry about, unless you're changing things, is the combat animations. Then these are pretty self-explanatory. These are the animations used for the upper body when doing these different things. Then we have lower body. Again, same thing. The only difference is combat and aimed share their animations, so it doesn't matter what stance you're in. These both use these animations. And then these are a little bit different because you've got blend spaces for your movement. If you have custom third-person animations that you want to set, you can do that here in these lower and upper body animations. And then you've got the standard jump animations you can set as well. So next we're going to go to the first-person animations. And you can see we've got the first-person arms animations. So I'm going to click this down. And exactly like the third-person, you can set up different animations for different skeletal meshes. If you wanted to do that, you would just click this little plus, and that will create a new set of animations you can change. So pretty much the same as the third-person animations. These are just used for the first-person arms. Something you might wonder is the body that you look at when you look down in first person, that uses the third-person animations, so we don't need to worry about that with our arms animations. And then again, we've just got our standard aimed and combat animations. If we open them up, they're all just standard animations. We don't need any blend spaces because we don't have to worry about the legs moving. So again, if you have custom first-person animations, you can set those up in here. Again, the default melee weapons only use combat ones, so you would really only need to set them in here. Quickly, if you did wanted to have different stances for your melee weapon, if we search for stance, you can see here we can set the default stance. So this is when we first equipped it, equip the item. This is the stance our character will go to and the animations it will use. We can allow stance change, so this basically means that the player can switch between different stances if you want to. And then lastly, allow attacking in standard stance. Basically just means if the character is in standard stance, they can still do attack animations. Again, there'll be more documentation on this linked in the documentation webpage, but that's just if you wanted to change that. So next we're going to look at aim offsets. This is going to be dependent on what animations you're using. By default, the weapons use procedural, which we'll set up in a minute. But if you already have aim offset animations that you want to use, you can just set this to standard, and then you can set your aim offset animations in here. But for this video, I'm going to be showing you how to set up procedural, so we'll do that now. So to set up procedural animation, aim offset, we're going to start with the third person. So we'll search for third person IK. And one thing we need to make sure is we need to set this to 0 rotation and location. Otherwise we won't be able to update, we won't be able to change the IK in real time during gameplay. This is really important if you're coming back to a melee weapon to say adjust it. You need to make sure that this is set to 0, otherwise you won't be able to adjust it in game. And you'll see a little bit more of what I mean in a second. So once we've set that, we can just hit compile. Then we're going to go to the master character, and we'll open this up. And in here we need to find the third person AO socket, And again, we're going to set the location and rotation to 0 on everything like that. And we want to compile that. So before we can start testing our procedural aim offset, we need to actually add an item for our character to pick up. So I'm going to do that quickly. I'm just going to be going to the item list here. I'm not going to be covering all of these settings in detail. I have a different video called Adding New Items where I go through all of these settings and explain them. So just for the sake of this video, I'm going to very quickly create a new item. I'm going to call it video axe. I'm going to set the name to video axe as well. I'm going to leave all of this as the same. All of this looks fine. I will quickly explain. So inventory actions are the options you have when you right click the item in the inventory. World actions are the options you see when you look at the item when it's dropped in the world. So there are a couple of settings that you may want to use for your holdable. First one is hold, hold and unhold. So this is if you right click the item in the inventory, you can select hold and the character will attempt to hold it. So I'm going to add that. And then action name is just the name that will appear on the button. There's also the equipped weapon option. So if your holdable is a weapon and it can go into a weapon slot, you can use this as well. So I'll name this equip. Then we've got world actions. So these are exactly the same. You can set hold, equipped, those sorts of things. If you want to add new ones, you can just click this plus button. I'm just going to leave this as pickup for now, just to save some time. And then quick action, you can have it so that when if your weapon's in a quick slot and you press the number for the quick slot, you can have it say hold and unhold. But I'm just going to leave that as none for now. Static mesh, I'm just going to use my axe that we are using. And then in UI details, I'm just going to quickly set this to our axe. I'm just reusing the included axe one, just so we have an icon that we can move in the inventory. Again, if you want more info about this, check out the add new item video and I explain all of this. But I will go into detail about the holdable details. So the first thing we've got in here is our holdable slots. So if we click the plus button, we can set whether the item can be put in the primary or secondary weapon slots. And you can set it up to have multiple ones if you want. I'm just going to have primary as my one. Next, we've got our holdable class. So this is the blueprint we've been working in. So for this will be video axe. Then we've got holdable slot sockets. So this is basically if our item is in the primary weapon slot and it's unequipped, this is the socket on the character's skeleton it will attach to. So you can set that up. These are set up by default. And if you want to, you can go to the character's skeleton and you can actually move this socket to change the position that the weapon will be when it's on their back. So that's those. Equip and unequip montages. If you click the little plus button here, you can set one. So you can set the the skeletal mesh. So this is useful if you have male and female again. So for this, I'm just going to set up it for the mannequin, and I'm going to use the included equip item montage. You don't have to have these at all. You can leave them empty and the character will just equip the weapon instantly. I'm going to leave unequip montage. It's exactly the same as the equip. In fact, we can just copy the equip and paste it onto the unequipped and it will actually just add that for us as well. And you can use the equipped item montage for unequipping as well, if you were wondering. And then lastly, only holdable when equipped. This basically means if this is true, the character can only sort of hold this weapon if it's in a weapon slot. And then if this is false, we can just right click it in our inventory and hold it even if it's not in a weapon slot. So it's up to you what you do with that. I'm going to leave it as empty just to make it easier to test. So that's pretty much it. Yeah, if you'll probably want to stop the video and fill this out in more detail and get everything correct, but I'm just going to save this now and move on. So next we're going to very quickly create a world item for our axe. So to do that, I'm just going to jump into world items, and I'm just going to duplicate any blueprint in here. So I'll just duplicate the 9mm. I'm going to call it BP_video axe _WI, and I put the WI at the end just so we know it's a world item. We'll open this up, and in here in the class defaults, we're going to set the row name to video axe, so it's the one we just added, and make sure item count is set to 1, and we can compile that. And now we can just drop that into the level, and we've got our axe that we can pick up in game. So next I'm going to show you how to set up the procedural aim offset. If you're using a standard aim offset like I showed earlier, you don't need to do this part, but for people using the procedural aim offset, I'll show you how to set that up. So first we're going to pick up our item, and we can open our inventory, and I'm just going to select hold, and you're going to see that our item's kind of messed up. And the reason for this is we haven't told it where we want our hand positioned. So the best way to do this, if I just hit Windows key, and then so I have my mouse, I'm going to grab the master character blueprint and just pop it out here. Now I'm going to do my best to find somewhere good to put this. This is a lot easier if you're not trying to record a video at the same time, but I'll make this a little bit bigger. I can hit the viewport, and you can see I've got my third person AO selected here, and if I start moving it, we should see it move in game. If it doesn't move, you need to exit out of the game and make sure that the location and rotation of it is 0, and then in your axe holdable blueprint you need to make sure that the third person IK is also at 0, 0. Then you can hit play and try again. But now we can start moving our axe and getting it positioned. So for me, I'm going to rotate it. You can also rotate it. Oh, I deselected that a sec. So we can rotate it. I'm going to rotate it this way. Another good thing you can do is actually if we hit eject, we can actually move our camera around. So we can see a couple of problems. First one is our axe seems like it's actually upside down. So that's fine, we can fix that. We don't exit the game. We can just go to our mannequin skeleton. I'm going to drag this into here as well. And we can actually update this in real time as well. So I'm going to adjust this so we get it a little bit more into his hand. You can spend way more time getting this more precisely. I'm just doing it quickly for video. I'm going to rotate it 180 degrees like this. It may look weird in here, but that's fine as long as it looks good in the game. It doesn't. It's not a big deal. And we can rotate it here like this. So that looks okay for our socket. Now we just have to actually get it in a decent place. Get our hand in a decent place. So again, back in our character with third person selected, third person AO selected, we're going to move this around. See, you can also select this button here, which makes the widget a little bit easier to control. So we can rotate this again, get this a little bit more set up. So something like this. Looks about right. So one thing you will want to do is we can possess our character again. You want to test it, make sure you don't get this sort of thing happening. That usually happens if your arm is a little bit too close to the character. So we can move it down, move it out a little bit more, and try it now. So it looks a lot better now when we look down. So if you do get that problem with the arm wiggling, you just need to adjust it a little bit. So where we've got it now, looks okay for me. Again, you can spend way more time getting this adjusted. One thing to remember is if you say later on you want to adjust this again, you will need to basically restart. You'll have to set the AO this socket here to 0, 0 on the rotation and location, and you'll have to set the this to 0, 0 as well if you want to adjust it later on. But I'm happy with this, so I'm going to hit stop. And what we're going to do is I'm going to copy with the AO third person AO selected. We'll copy location, go to our axe holdable, and we'll paste that into location here on the third person IK, and then do the same for rotation, and paste that in there. And we can compile and save that now. So the next part is going to be pretty similar. It's going to be for the first person. So over here on my details, I'm going to search for first person IK. And mine's already set like this, but you need to make sure location and rotation is 0. And then in your character blueprint, I'm going to find the first person AO and make sure that it is set to 0 and 0 on the rotation and location. So that looks good. One other thing you want to do is select the first person arms here. And I'm not moving this window because we're going to be using it again. We're going to scroll down to rendering, and you may not see these settings, so you may have to, where's that go? Go down to rendering, hit this down arrow, and then we're going to untick only owner C. We're just going to do this while we're positioning our axe. We'll turn it back on later, so I'm just going to compile that quickly. Then we're going to jump in, going to hit play, and we're going to pick up our axe again. We're going to hold it. So you can see it's remembered our third person position. If I hit V to enter first person, you can see we can't see our axe. So again, I'm going to hit Windows key, going to eject, and you see that our first person mesh is kind of a bit off. So first thing we're going to do is with our first person AO, we can start moving this about and get an idea of where we want to put this. So I'm going to start by rotating the hand like this. So with first person, you're going to want to possess and see what you can see in first person every now and then. So now I can see the axe, I can get a better idea of what I want to do. So I'm going to move it down a little bit. And you really have a lot more freedom in first person because you don't have to worry about what it looks like for other people. All that matters is what it looks like for us in this camera view. So I'm kind of happy with this, looks fine to me. If you get a problem with the character kind of like jittering a little bit, might be that you're trying to set it too far away, so the hand is kind of like snapping a little bit. So you're going to need to just bring that closer to the camera a bit. Again, you can adjust this, spend a lot more time getting it precise, but I'm fairly happy with this, so I'm just going to hit stop. And then with our first person AO, I'm going to copy the location, go back to our axe, paste that into the first person IK location, and then the same with rotation, like that. And now we've got our procedural aim offsets set up, and we can compile and save this. One quick thing I did want to add is if you change out your idle animation or your movement animations, those can affect the procedural aim offset. So what you might find is if you change your idle animation now after we've set these up, it might not be in the correct position anymore. So you may have to repeat this process if you do later on down the line change your idle animation. So that's just something to keep in mind when working with these procedural aim offsets. So we've finished now with the procedural aim offsets. So one thing you must remember to do is in the character blueprint down here with the first person arm selected, we need to go and find that setting that we turned on, only owner C. That needs to be set to true, so make sure you do that. And we can compile and save this now, and we can actually just exit out of that now. So that's almost everything done. We've got all of the sort of basic things set up. One thing you might want to look at is the melee attack animations. So these are the animations played when you go to attack. I'm just using the included melee attack montage. If you have your own melee attack animations, you can add those here. I will quickly show you if we open up this melee montage. If you're using your own montages, you need to make sure that the socket is set to the upper body pre-AO group. And then in your animation file, not in the montage, in the animation file. So I'm just going to open mine up. It's called the same thing. So melee weapon. So it's that one. You're going to need these notifies. So the notifies shown here, these must be included in your attack animation. If you don't know how to add notifies, you can right click, add notify, skeletal notifies, and you can find all of them here. You don't have to use two sort of tracks like I am. You can do it all on one. I've just done it in two to tidy it up. But yeah, you must have these set up in your animation, otherwise it will not work. But if you're just using the, sorry, we'll go back to the axe. If you're just using the default one, you don't need to worry about that. Past that, I can explain some of the damage settings. So open those up. With resources, you can go and check out the resource video that I have. I explain how these are set up. But for damage, you can see that we have basically a hitbox and then 2 damage values, min and max. So I'll randomly do damage between those 2 numbers, depending on the hitbox. So if we hit the head hitbox, we'll do between 50 and 80 damage. But if we hit the arm, it will do between 5 and 10. Damage type, this is to do with the armor system as well as the durability system. So you can pick what damage type this weapon does. I'll have a separate documentation on the armor / durability system that you can check out. That will be linked in the documentation. Then we have bleeding, so you can make it so that the weapon deals bleed damage. You can have it so that the weapon randomly applies bleed damage, so it doesn't always do a bleed. You can set the damage amount for the bleed, what chance there is of the bleed being applied, and then how long the bleed will last. If you get stuck or confused about what a setting might do, don't forget you can hover over the name and you'll get these descriptions that sort of explain what the setting does, and they can be really helpful. Next thing is the surface effects. So these are basically when this surface type is hit, this sound will be played. By default, there aren't any surface types set, but you can use physics materials, which if you don't know about, you can look up. Epic have really good documentation on. But basically you can set up a different sound for different surface types, and then it's the same for decals. You can set up different decals for different surfaces, and then the same for particles. You can see actually here that the blood particle effect is spawned when it hits this surface type, which by default is the character body. So it knows that when the axe hits the character body, we want to spawn the blood. But yeah, if you don't know about physics materials, I suggest looking up that documentation from Epic. It's pretty clear documentation. And then just going through the settings quickly, I'll see if there's anything else that will be useful. You can use the durability settings, so you can have it be so that every time the axe hits something, this is how much durability is reduced on the weapon. And then use durability check basically means that if this is true, we won't be able to use the weapon if we're at 0 durability. If I scroll down, sway is used if you move the camera quickly. There's kind of a delay in the hand movement. This can make the weapon feel a little bit more like it has weight. You can enable this, and there's a few settings here that you can play around with. Leaning it allows your character to lean when they're holding this axe. You can enable that and again play with the values. You can hover over them to get some more sort of details about what they do. Clipping is when the character goes too close to a wall and the weapon will be kind of rotated away from it. You can use this for melee weapons if you like. Again, these settings have descriptions that you can read in your own time. We have movement speeds, which are set here. These will only be used when we're holding this axe if use holdable speeds is ticked on. If this is false, these will be ignored and the movement speeds set in the player inventory will be used instead. Camera shake, so this is the camera shake animations played when walking, sprinting, idle. So you can set those up here. If you don't want to use them at all, you can just leave them blank, so set it to none. Or you can untick this option here, and then it will use the camera shake values set in the character component instead. And that's pretty much it for the settings. So hopefully I've given you a good idea of all of the different things you can change and do with the melee weapons. Lastly, melee trace channel, you always want to make sure this is set to weapon. It should be anyway, but it's worth checking. But that's pretty much it for this video. If you have any questions, please leave a comment. And yeah, if there's any problems, you can join our Discord, and don't forget to subscribe. Thank you for watching.